as we return this week to Psalms of Disorientation, a Psalm of Disorientation this week, let me introduce to you a book that is all about orientation, disorientation, and reorientation in the Psalms. It's by Walter Brueggemann. It's called The Psalms of the Life of Faith. He draws on a couple of Pauls, Paul Ricoeur and Paul Tournier, but everybody after Walter Brueggemann points to him when it comes to bringing orientation, disorientation, and reorientation into our understanding of the Psalms. So that's Walter Brueggemann, and on disorientation he says this: human experience includes those dangerous and difficult times of dislocation and disorientation when the sky does fall and the world does indeed come to an end. The times of disorientation are those when persons are driven to the extremities of emotion, of integrating capacity, and of language. In the company of Isaiah, we are undone. There is no speech, and there is no safe reality about which to speak. So Psalms of disorientation are often Psalms of lament. Some of the Psalms remember back when there were better times in the old period of orientation, and there is a wish to return. Some of the Psalms of disorientation are heavy in anger and resentment against the one who has caused the disorientation, even if it's God or enemies. And there's a belief that the loss of orientation is reversible, and the old orientation is retrievable. We can go back to how it was. There's an expectation and even an insistence in these Psalms that Yahweh can be moved to act, and that Yahweh will act, and Yahweh will bring things to a new life order. For the people of God, let me suggest this: that disorientation is the chaos of having everything you thought you knew about how God works in the world, about who God is, what it means to be God's people, and everything overturned in a most unexpected and cruel fashion. Our response says something about what we believe about God, about how God works, and what we think God owes us. So then, how do we live for God in difficult times? Let's once again read Psalm 137, a lament over the destruction of Jerusalem. Psalm 137 says this: by the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, and there we wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows there we hung up our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs, and our tormentors asked for mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither. Let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. If I do not remember you, if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites, the day of Jerusalem's fall, how they said, tear it down down to its foundations. O daughter of Babylon, you devastator. Happy shall they be who pay you back what you have done to us. Happy shall they be who take your little ones and dash them against the rock. When we are living the disorientation, like the Israelites on the way to Babylon, the question is, how can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? How do we know the people of God lived poorly in times of orientation, in good times? When they don't know how to live for God in difficult times. When they are concerned they might forget the works of God in the good times. When the comfortable place of their living in good times has replaced the God who led them there. When it's about Jerusalem and not about God. When they look to blame their plight on another, when God has already made known the reason for their exile. There are so many verses you can go and read in the Old Testament. They say, if you do this, you will be exiled. And then other verses, like in Jeremiah and Isaiah and Ezekiel, where it's laid out very clearly how you have treated the widow and the orphan and the foreigner is the reason for your exile. But we still look to blame someone else. And when vengeance is your desire, when vengeance is the desire of those who are disoriented against those they believe who caused the disorientation, perhaps we have been living poorly in times of orientation to lead us to that place. You see, being disoriented can mean being hurt, being frustrated, being confused, being angry, being sad. And it can often be expressed in words that sound terrifying, dashing Babylon's young ones against a rock. And it can be so profound an experience that it is beyond our words. However it is expressed, being disoriented cannot be an excuse for ungodly living. It is often a reflection on how a people lived in times of orientation. How strongly were we committed to unity, based on justice, expressed and experienced through worship when times were good? What false memories or convictions did we embrace? False memories about how things used to be, false convictions about how we got there. What blinders did we put on that allowed us to miss needs and people and injustices in good times? And what do we believe that limits how God can work? So what do we need to know in times of disorientation? What do we need to do in times of disorientation if we are to faithfully walk in the way of Jesus when times are difficult? First, let me suggest that we need to mourn. Tears are not a sign of weakness. We need to express all of the hurt, all of the heartache, all of the frustration, all of the loneliness, all of the confusion, all of the anger. We need to express it to God as a confession. This is what we have. This is what we are experiencing. This is how we look at the world right now. All of this we need to express. God is strong enough, gracious enough, loving enough, holy enough, even to receive our rage. So let God have it. Let God have our rage, our anger, our hurt, our confusion. It's too dangerous to keep to ourselves in times when things don't make any sense, when everything has been turned upside down, when we feel like the world is falling apart. We need to mourn. We need to express that we are experiencing loss. We need to mourn, but we can't stay there. We also need to remember. Remember this, that the songs of the Lord are still the songs of the Lord. So sing. Circumstances are not a sign of God's power, of God's goodness, of God's care, or God's presence, whether they be good or bad. God's power and goodness and care and presence are with us in all of the circumstances of life. So sing. If God is worthy of our worship in good times, then God is worthy of our worship in bad times. Sing God's praise. If God is worthy of our trust, sing God's name. If God is good, sing God's goodness. If God is merciful and gracious, sing mercy and grace. The songs of the Lord are still the songs of the Lord, even when the world is crashing down around us. So remember and retell. The old stories still have meaning and power and significance when things are hard. God has been faithful in the past. There were good times in the past. Tell the stories. God brought rescue and redemption and deliverance before. Retell the stories, knowing that God is not finished with us yet. Let's tell the stories of when things were hard and God came through, of when things were hard and God showed us how to live, when things were good and we rejoiced in God. Let's retell the old stories because they still have meaning and significance right now when things are hard. And let's resolve what will be our legacy in difficult times. We can't let bitterness and vengeance be the last words from our mouth, the last thoughts of our heart. Bitterness and vengeance will attach the hardest part of the hard times to our person, and we'll have to carry them on through whatever times come. We'll be consumed by them. There is no joy, there is no love, there is no peace, there is no unity, no justice, no resilience, no worship, only dry bones in a deserted valley if our last words are bitterness and vengeance. We need to resolve to be made new. Even in the hard times, we need to resolve to be made new, even as the times will be renewed. Just as good times cannot last forever, difficult times cannot last forever. When renewal comes, be prepared to embrace change. When renewal comes, be prepared to live in love. When renewal comes, be prepared to experience and express joy. When renewal comes, resolve to be more than you ever thought possible before. More loving, more generous, more compassionate, more joy-filled, more patient, more aware, more present. Resolve now to be made new in the difficult times. And these are difficult times. These are disorienting times. We see every day on the news hard things going on. And often we see every day in the news more confusing information about how things are going to be. But in Philippians 4, Paul writes this: I know what it is to have little. I know what it is to have plenty. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being well fed and of going hungry, of having plenty and of being in need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Paul is saying, I can live for Jesus in times that are hard and in times that are good. It is not the times that change my faith and my commitment to live for Jesus. It's whether or not I'm willing to keep that commitment. It is by the power of Christ living in us that we live like Christ in difficult times, that we can mourn honestly, that we can remember faithfully, that we can retell joyfully, and resolve sincerely to be made new. How can we sing the songs of the Lord when we're in a foreign land, when everything seems to be falling apart? Everything is hard. Everything is difficult. Everything is uncertain. We're frustrated. We're hurt. We're alone. We're angry. We're confused. We're all of these things. How can we do that? How can we sing the songs of the Lord? By remembering that God is still God, and that Jesus went through hard times so that we might know we have a God who understands, that we have each other, never forgetting that we have each other. We're not in this alone. How can we sing the songs of the Lord when we're in a foreign land? By continuing to believe that God raised Jesus from the dead for a purpose, for a reason, and that he's not done with us yet. It's hard, and the hard times are not done yet, but we're in this together, and God is in this with us and for us. We can live through hard times, and we can sing the songs of the Lord through hard times until we see the times renewed and ourselves renewed along with it. But maybe there is another way to view times of disorientation. Maybe also disorientation calls for a kind of incarnation. Consider just this past week the shooting of Jacob Blake in the States, the storms that hit the Gulf in the southern states, back to school information that is anything but clear. Consider the land back camp in Victoria Park. Black Lives Matter that is still not done protesting because change still hasn't happened. Consider the involvement of professional sports in walking out of not just regular season games, although that happened, but playoff games. Consider all the impact that's going to happen from the election down in the States. Consider all of the disorientation that is going on around us. How do we live? We have to ask ourselves, how do we live? When we see others living in disorientation, not all of this directly impacts us. So how do we live when we see others living in disorientation? When we look beyond organizations and movements to see individual people who are hurting, who are marginalized, who are angry and alone and afraid, who are dismissed and oppressed and persecuted and victimized and made invisible. How do we live when we see others struggling under the burden of disorientation? Sometimes the right choice, the choice that looks like Jesus, is to choose disorientation, to choose to leave what is comfortable and known for us, and to embrace what is difficult and frightening, and to enter another's disorientation. To choose to live in solidarity with others living in disorientation so that they would know they're not alone, so that they would know that they're loved, so they would know they are worth the struggle, that we might enter another's disorientation, choosing to live there, so that we might amplify their voice, so we might work to alleviate their suffering, that we might build relationships of love and of trust. And together with those for whom we have entered disorientation. Together we might seek orientation, that we might share their journey in the hope of seeing others finding reorientation. Like Jesus, who was made flesh and came to dwell among us. Maybe this is a time when we can choose to enter the disorientation of another, to see them brought through the struggle into a renewed time. It's not always our disorientation that's at the center. Perhaps it's the disorientation of another. I think both of those are true. Both of those are found in Psalm 137. That is the lamentation over the destruction of Jerusalem. Let me read it once again as we close. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, there we wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows where we hung our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs, and our tormentors asked for mirth, saying, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither. Let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth, if I do not remember you, if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites, the day of Jerusalem's fall, how they said, tear it down, down to its foundations. O daughter of Babylon, you devastator. Happy shall they be who pay you back what you have done to us. Happy shall they be who take your little ones and dash them against the rock. In our own disorientation, and for the sake of others' experience of disorientation, Lord, hear our prayer.